Welcome to the Jessie Freeze Show on WMTR 1250 AM, a Beasley Media Group station. Brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey. Streaming live on WMTRAM.com and TalkStreamLive.com.
I'm Jessie Freeze. My guest today, United States Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer, representing the 5th District of New Jersey. He prides himself on his bipartisanship. He works across party lines on key issues and is co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Just 2 months into his first term, he passed his first amendment in the House, which was signed into law. And there have been many more since. Gottheimer has been named one of the top 10 members with the most amendments considered on the House floor. And it's a pleasure to have you join us this morning, Congressman Josh Gottheimer.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessie. It's a huge honor to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Also joining us, Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider NJ. Thank you for joining us this morning, Max Pizzaro.
Thank you so much, Jessie. Thrilled to be here with you both. Thank you.
Before we begin, Congressman Gottheimer, the news dominating the headlines is Donald Trump and 18 allies who have been indicted in Georgia on 41 accounts over their efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss. Trump calls this a witch hunt. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis secured a 41-count racketeering indictment against Trump and 18 others, including New York City former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who pioneered RICO prosecutions and is now charged in one. As a member and a bipartisan member of the U.S. Congress, what is your take on this? And Trump faces in total 91 felony accounts.
I think it's very clear that former President Trump bears some responsibility, in my opinion, for January 6th. It's part of the reason I felt that he should be impeached, which I voted for in his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. I was in the gallery and in the House chamber when the attack on the Capitol occurred. It was not a tour. It was an attack on our country, the greatest country in the world. And I believe we've got to get to the bottom of this. I trust our system and the courts to do that. And obviously there's been a very thorough investigation. And I think appropriate action now is to understand what happened, who bears the responsibility in the eyes of the court. And it's part of the reason, Jessie, why I was so involved in helping pass, and I led in the House of Representatives, the Electoral Count Reform Act, which passed right at the end of the last Congress, which establishes clear guidelines for counting electoral votes for president and vice president, clarifies the role of the vice president as being purely ceremonial, and raises the threshold of members of Congress to initiate objections, and ensures that electoral votes tallied by Congress actually reflects each state's vote for president. Because part of what happened last time was that they were trying to pressure the vice president, members of Congress, to fail to certify an election in the will of the people.
Absolutely.
And so the good news is that legislation is now law. And so I'm hoping for all future elections we take that out of the equation. But you can't take out of the equation what I believe President Trump played a key role in the attack of the United States Capitol.
Pardon me, Jessie, but do you believe then that the third indictment, that is the federal indictment, sir, is more important or more severe than what came out this week, the fourth indictment out of Georgia?
None of us are immersed in all the evidence of what they've got in each particular instance. Obviously, grand juries have indicted. The federal prosecutors have been working for some time. The prosecutor in Georgia has been working for years as well. It's one of these things that will be difficult to really tell which one of these indictments will ultimately, what the outcome will be for each of them in these various courts. But Max, what I think is pretty clear is that you see a series of instances where former President Trump acted in a way that is not becoming of our great country, of that office, which I think deserves the respect both in it and out of it. And again, I was there. There was an attack on the United States Capitol. And I don't know how if you were watching that day, watching the former president and what he said. And of course, we'll see what the other 18 defendants, what comes out in terms of what role he was playing. I think it's very important that evidence is out there and we get to the bottom of actually what happened that day to prevent it from ever occurring again and holding those responsible.
If he is found guilty of even one indictment, can he still run, Congressman?
He can still run, whether or not, that will be left to the voters in terms of holding him accountable for the outcomes of any of these indictments and cases. And then there's the matter of what will ultimately, if he were found guilty, what would happen?
Is it true, and I'm hearing this from all sorts, that if Trump is reelected, he still has a strong base behind him, that he can postpone any indictment for 4 years?
Well, again, that's going to have to be up to each judge in the matter and decide if they want to hold the former president, make accountable now and make him answer for these charges. But these are extremely concerning accusations and evidence in all these cases. They're all very serious. And of course, anything that undermines our democracy, I believe, is very serious. But I think what you're seeing, Jesse, overall is extremism versus common sense. And you've got some extremes in this country who want to stand behind the former president, despite his actions. And I believe at the end of the day, the country wants reasonableness. They want people who put the country first. They want common sense, and they want to turn the page on all this division. I know I do. I think a lot of people I speak to regularly are sick and tired of people who appear to not put the country ahead of themselves or party, frankly.
Well, this is an excellent analysis, and may justice triumph. May we all pray for that the right outcome comes to being. Turning back now to our planned interview, Congressman Gottheimer, you played a key role in crafting and passing the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and this bill is helping build the decrepit Gateway train tunnel, bridges, roads, New Jersey Transit, as well as you're fighting climate change. What are some of the major problems that you've solved in this? And can you address this for us?
Well, I think we all agree, and Jesse, it's a really important question. If you look at just infrastructure, both in our country and especially where we live in the tri-state area in Jersey, we know that it's taken a beating over the years. Our infrastructure is older than other parts of the country, and it was built longer ago. And, the weather is tougher in Jersey than it is in Florida. Right. So, our roads require a lot more work. The tunnel that you're talking about, the train tunnel that's under the Hudson between New York and New Jersey, where trains run, is, 110 years old or older. It's literally fallen apart.
Will it last while they're doing it, do you think, while they're trying to repair it?
Well,
because if it doesn't,
it's a great question. There's a lot of studies on that. And what they're doing right now is aggressively repairing as they go. I'll say it's basically putting Band-Aids on I've been in that tunnel. They're literally putting Band-Aids on problems where you got leaks, right. They deal with it. You've got electric problems, they try to fix it. But it's why a lot of the tunnel, one of the other tunnels comes down pretty regularly. We're left with one tube to go in and out of New York while they're fixing with the other one. But, this is not a way to run a state or an economy where 20% of the country's GDP runs through our region, and we're stuck with, a system that's fallen apart. So we've got to invest in mass transit, which the infrastructure bill that we passed, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which the most significant investment in infrastructure in 100 years, it deals with not only the Gateway train tunnel, but making sure that we address our crumbling roads, our bridges, many of which I've visited, that are also literally falling apart. They were built during New Deal era bridges. They're crumbling. They go around on our highways regularly with basically long sticks to knock off pieces of concrete, chunks of concrete, before they could fall on the highway, right? To just get rid of them. I mean, you're talking about in a great country like ours, that's what you're dealing with. So this is going to help invest in fixing those, the bridges, the roads, the tunnel that we talked about. It's a huge investment in jobs, 2 million jobs a year for the next decade. These are hardworking men and women of labor jobs, great jobs. And Jersey does incredibly well. Part of what I focused on in the negotiating was making sure that we took care of the Northeast, which pays in to the kitty and the central kitty far more than other parts of the country. And I thought it just only and we get back less. So I thought we're going to get $8 billion for Jersey for our highways and our roads and bridges, $1 billion for critical water infrastructure to get forever chemicals like lead water and PFAS out of our drinking water. We've got resources for upgrading broadband. We've got a lot of places in New Jersey that don't have any access to reliable, affordable, high-speed internet. We've got resources for electric vehicle infrastructure and climate resiliency, dealing with floods and issues of that nature, $4 billion for public transportation. When you look at it, it's a huge investment in Jersey and our country and our economy.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Pardon me, Jessie, but is there a specific stimulus here for best practices, Congressman, essentially more rail and trying to get fewer people out of cars in any sense? Does the money account for any kind of visionary plan in that regard?
I mean, part of the debate we had, and it's a great question, Max, part of the debate we had was making sure that you can you're looking forward to the future where you're will invest more in mass transit, of course, and more in electric vehicle infrastructure and alternative energy. At the same time, recognizing that you can't just pull the plug on what we have now, right? I mean, you need both. And one of the issues I've been talking about a lot lately is, the congestion tax. And people keep saying, well, everyone should just take mass transit. And I said, well, I'd love that. I'd love a system where we had mass transit the way some countries do, where it is reliable and is dispersed to all parts of suburbs and not just some areas, and actually doesn't leave out the rural parts of our state. But the truth is, right now, our mass transit system needs a lot of investment still. It's why I fought so hard for the infrastructure bill and to make sure we invest in mass transit, because New Jersey Transit doesn't go to a lot of places in our state. Our bus system, as you know, is not everywhere where it needs to be. We've got a bus terminal that can't handle more capacity in New York City for where people are commuting to. We're doing more on electric buses now, and that's in this bill, but you still need a place for the buses to go, and they need to go on the roads as well, and those roads have to work. Unfortunately, the reality is that our bus services have been cut back since the pandemic. So in a lot of places, there are no buses. You've got rural parts of New Jersey that have no bus service or even any train service. You got a lot of suburbs with zero train service. And I talked about the Gateway train tunnel, and Jessie, you were saying it's incredible. You can't add more capacity and more train. We can't even add more trains to the system. There's no way they'd get into New York. As it is, they're backed up outside many of our train stations. If you go to Secaucus or Newark, you got to wait because there's no room to get into the system. We don't even have room on enough platform space in New York's Penn Station to let people off. So all these things have to be fixed, right? So you got to fix these things and invest, and then you can tell people, hey, we expect you to use more of this, but you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We got to do both at the same time. We got to
But do we have enough funds
and make sure our roads are fixed.
Do we have enough funds to fix all this, Congressman?
Well, I certainly am going to keep fighting for more. We just got $1.2 trillion for the country and a huge slug for Jersey. But, we're going to need more investment to keep it up on both fronts. And that's where, something I've been very focused on since the day I got to Congress. And we're going to have to keep investing and encouraging people wherever they can to build more mass transit options. But it all comes back to, for New York, we got to get this Gateway train tunnel done, which will give us 4 tubes ultimately when it's finished, 2 in, 2 out. And we've got to make sure we fix the bus terminal in New York City and get these platforms expanded.
Absolutely. And the last on this list is climate change. Are we standing on the precipice of disaster with climate change?
Well, I don't know, anyone who's living in the world right now, I don't understand how you say that climate change doesn't exist, right? They still have people have this debate with some folks, although it's far fewer than we used to, with all these climate issues that we're facing as a country. And we see it with the flooding here and with fires and storms around the country and the heat waves. The great news about legislation, not just the infrastructure bill, but the Inflation Reduction Act, which we passed at the end of last Congress, makes significant investments in climate resiliency, in electric vehicle infrastructure, incentives for people to move to alternative and cleaner energy, because I think you need to incentivize people to do that and to build and to make these investments and make it affordable for folks. We've made the largest climate investments ever in the last couple of years, and I think that's critically important, but it doesn't happen overnight. And as you know, we live in one world. So if China keeps putting online coal plants like they're doing right now, that affects us, right? You're still right, and so it's not like you can build a giant wall to the air where you say, well, that's over there, that's your problem. We're all sharing the same planet here.
And Congressman, the next on my list, New Jersey is still suffering from SALT, or the federal tax deduction for state and local taxes, which has been capped at $10,000 since 2017. New Jersey has among the highest property taxes in the nation. And by reducing the SALT deduction, New Jersey residents are forced to pay taxes on their income twice. This is unfair. It's burdensome. Will this ever be solved? And what can be done about it?
Well, Max will tell you, Jessie, I've been talking about this issue since we've talked about this issue since the beginning of this fight, when the red states stuck it to us. I affectionately call them the moocher states, because they take far more from everyone else than they put in, and they decided, listen, they were going to give other tax breaks for themselves. at our cost, and that's literally what they did was they took that SALT deduction. And folks who don't know about this is where it used to be that you could deduct what you paid in property taxes and your state income taxes, but from your income before you pay taxes, your federal taxes, so you didn't get taxed twice on the same income. And New Jersey for property taxes are higher. I wish they were lower, but it is what it is. We're able to deduct and save money, and now we can't. So two things I like to see is one, obviously, let's get these property taxes down and taxes down overall in Jersey. But secondly, we need to get this deduction back fully so that it's not limited, as you pointed out, Jessie, at just $10,000 total that you can deduct with what you pay in your property taxes and your state income taxes. The House, we've passed it. Democrats leading in the House have passed it now 4 times to restore the state and local tax deduction, to give it back. We've not been able to get it out of the Senate, where you need a high threshold of votes. And depressingly, the tax committee, which is now the Republicans that are in charge in the House, the tax committee just passed their tax bill out, and it didn't include restoring the state and local tax deduction, which is incredibly frustrating. I'll give you good news, then we'll move on to the good news. Within the next 2.5 years, 2015, it will come back. So the tax bill that was passed limiting SALT and capping $10,000 expires, and the deduction comes back if nothing else happens. So there's some folks who are negotiating now and trying to get deals cut so it can come back sooner. But if no action occurs, it comes back. And so I just want to put that out there because I think that's at least something to look forward to.
Well,
Jesse, he's right.
Go ahead,
he has
Max.
been fighting for this for years, and we truly appreciate it. I would just add this as a follow-up, Congressman, if I could, and that is the average taxpayer sees you fighting those moocher states and appreciates it, but simultaneously sees spending going up considerably in Trenton. In fact, since the last governor, the budget has risen by $20 billion, Congressman. And you touched on it. You said we need to lower property taxes in New Jersey, but what can they do at the state level to complement your good work at the federal level, specifically in terms of getting that budget down to give the average taxpayer the sense that it's not just going after the moocher states, but also taking care of business in our state?
Well, that's like a 2-hour-long question and 2-hour-long answer to that question, because I think if you're talking about the state budget, there's a lot we're going to have to keep looking at. And part of the concern is we're not growing jobs and associated revenue at the rate we should be in terms of bringing jobs to Jersey. And we've lost a lot of taxpayers. And as you know, Max, it's complicated because you've got to look at every aspect of the budget. That's not just a simple answer. The piece in Congress that I've been focused on and really trying to address is how do we at least get more dollars back from the federal government, our tax dollars back to Jersey, where historically we've not been great at this. So when an infrastructure bill passes or the CHIPS Act passes, something I worked a lot on, the bipartisan CHIPS Act, which deals with the fact that all these, we saw this during the pandemic, especially all these things like semiconductors and chips that are built in China and how reliant we are on that region for chips, and we don't build enough in the United States. And it's incentives to actually start building more in the United States, which I think is critical to our competitiveness, especially against China, which I see as our number one adversary. We have to figure out how we get more of these jobs here, more of the creation of our manufacturing base here, and bring these jobs actually to Jersey and fight that when bills come out like the CHIPS Act, we in Jersey actually fight for dollars to New Jersey. When the infrastructure bill happens, we fight on all these competitive grants with other states to make sure those dollars come to Jersey. Then we're up in my district, since I'm in office, 357% in terms of what we're getting back to the 5th Congressional District, just by fighting for these dollars for cops and firefighters and fire trucks and roads and other things. And that's the part that I can do a lot more to play a direct role in right now, and it's where I'm going to continue fighting for. So Max, you asked a great question. I'm not sure I can answer you in even a 20-minute radio show without having a much longer conversation on this, but I think you're right to bring up the concern.
By restoring the SALT deduction, we can provide immediate tax relief to hard-working families, which is so important for New Jersey. I've got to go on a break.
And Jessie, when you get a fire truck back and you get the federal government to bring our tax dollars back here to pay for that fire truck, if it's $1 million for a town, which I've gotten a few of these, then the amount of money that's saved on the property taxes is significant, right? That local town doesn't have to put that on their property tax line, just like as you point out. If we can claw more of these dollars back when we get SALT back for folks, all those things will help on making life more affordable here, which I think is critically important.
Congressman, you were instrumental in getting the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act signed into law. It reduces our reliance on foreign countries like China, Iran, Russia, North Korea, and other oppressive regimes. And as a member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, you understand that the safety and security of the United States is at a critical juncture with rapidly evolving threats and foreign terrorists. Also, Congressman, a subject I'm very much interested in, you have done so much to encourage electric vehicle companies to not drop AM radio from their cars. AM is vital importance, and as you say, the backbone of emergency alerts on the road. You even contacted Elon Musk on this. Give us your take on AM radio and the importance in New Jersey.
Well, you just said it well. I mean, not just is AM great for shows like this and for sports and for news, but we've invested as a country a significant amount in the National Public Warning System, which it backs up AM radio stations to make sure that, God forbid, there's a cyber attack or a nuclear threat or a natural disaster like Sandy, that our radio systems are still able to work and people can still get information, right? That AM still works. And AM bands travel further and they're able to get through buildings, unlike other stations, and they're backed up, right? So Sirius radio is not backed up. There's no power backups if there's a natural disaster. 47 million Americans listen to AM radio every day, and the viewership is increasing. We've got unbelievable amounts of great AM radio in New Jersey that people listen to, including for so many different communities and targeted like African American, Hispanic radio, and Asian American radio. And my feeling for those like Elon Musk, who came out and said, we don't feel like spending the money to keep AM radio in vehicles, right? Because what happens with electric vehicles, there's some static interference. They have to spend a few bucks and put a coating on to stop that interference. It works. It's fine. They just don't want to spend the money. And I said to Elon Musk, give enough money to buy Twitter and send rockets to space. You certainly can afford to keep AM radios in your Teslas and protect our national security. And so Ford Motor Company reversed course, and now they're going to keep AM radio in their vehicles after announcing they weren't going to. And now I'm calling on all the others, and I've got bipartisan legislation in the House and the Senate to require it for a safety perspective to make sure that we keep the AM radio in our vehicles.
Wonderful. And there are 77 AM radio stations in New Jersey depending on you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, United States Congressman Josh Gottheimer.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Jessie, thanks for all you do. And you're a gift to Jersey and the area. And so are you, Max.
Amen on Jessie. And thank you for a substantive conversation to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. We'll be right back with Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief, co-founder of Insider NJ, on mental health in New Jersey, bullying, and the heartbreaking outbreak of the rise of young children committing suicide. I'm Jessie Fries.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people on issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Fries Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. Max Pizzaro, as chief editor for Insider NJ, what is your take on Donald Trump and his 18 allies' recent indictments in the Georgia case?
Well, I think it's one of the most important indictments in our country's history, Jessie. I think this is an indictment that truly tests the foundations of the country and the limits of power and the degree to which we, as a nation, will allow one person to assume despotic control and conceivably nullify an election. He's been charged with standing at the head of a criminal conspiracy numbering at least 19 people, and they are named in the indictment, and going and willfully, when he was advised and he knew he had lost the election, going and attempting to use his power to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. You're asking me what my immediate thought is of it, and that is,
yes,
this will be difficult to tie to Joe Biden or the Democrats in Washington or in New York City because it's coming out of Georgia. This is the Fulton County prosecutor, and this was a Republican Secretary of State leaned on by the Republican president who resisted his attempts to reverse the election in Georgia that Joe Biden won. It's a very, very serious case that goes to the heart of our identity as Americans.
It certainly is. Max Pizzaro, you have written many heartbreaking accounts of children being bullied and committing suicide. What is being done to stop this, to fix this? Tell us about your interviews with some of these parents of children who have taken their lives.
Well, Jessie, you actually educated me regarding a bipartisan social media bill championed by U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal, it's called the Kids Online Safety Act. And Senator Marsha Blackburn. Yes. And I didn't know anything about this until you keyed me into it. And I really think there's a lot of value here because I will say this, Jessie, many of these laws don't have any teeth. And it's just, frankly, a lot of talk. And you and I have both spoken with Diane Grossman, and she said we don't really need any more laws without teeth. And I do think this bipartisan Kids Online Safety Act does have some teeth, and it would update the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. It protects children under age 13, and it specifically lays out what corporations that own these social media platforms need to do in order to limit the influx of damaging material into our kids' minds and lives. So it is, in fact, moving forward. It moved out of committee, and to this point, it has languished in Congress. But this is a critical piece of federal legislation that will, in fact, go some ways in holding these big corporate entities feeding our kids this gibberish and very damaging material accountable.
And what role does social media and online play on these suicides of young children?
It creates all kinds of social pressure. It's a social pressure sometimes that our kids can't organize. And so it's going at them all the time. Tremendous peer pressure. And in numerous cases where these beautiful young kids have ended up committing suicide, they felt like they were in a pressure cooker of intense scrutiny and ridicule, oftentimes by their peers on social media platforms. And sometimes it's difficult to assume a sense of control of one's young life with all of this out there. And so this federal bill in particular would stem some of that. And there's still a long way to go. And of course, as you and I have discussed before, it really does begin with families and parents in our own homes, really making sure that we're vigilant and protecting our young people. Starts there, but we also need legislation and we need social factors to assist us and to fortify our best efforts to protect our children, the most vulnerable among us.
They certainly are. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Max Pizzaro, last question. What are some potential signs parents and caregivers should be aware of that might indicate a child is struggling with suicidal thoughts?
I think that children have a tendency to become withdrawn. This is a virtual world, Jessie, that our kids are contending with. And what happens is they become more withdrawn from their families and more engaged in those so-called relationships and friendships online. And the telltale sign is when you see your child withdrawing from those normal family interactions and becoming more subdued or becoming disengaged from reality. That's the first telltale sign.
Our time has come to a close. Thank you, Max Pizzaro, Editor-in-Chief of Insider NJ, and Congressman Josh Gottheimer for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Jessie, it is an absolute pleasure to always be with you. Thank you so much for everything you do. And I'm just thrilled to be on the show with you and with the Congressman. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm Jessie Freeze. We'll be right back.